The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and tonight I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, darling. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How have you been this week?
I've been really well, thank you.
We've been busy with lots of other radio shows.
Ah, yeah, as always. I love doing it, though, so what can I say? I get to do what I love to do.
I know. Our guest for tonight was going to be Donna Fox Butler, but unfortunately she's not well, so I'd like to say to her, if she's listening, get well soon. We need you on the show.
Yeah, we do.
It'll be quite interesting to have you on. Yeah, especially considering she doesn't do any other interviews ever. So
No.
I'm quite looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get her on.
But at last minute, John Griffiths has stepped into her shoes. So hello, John.
Hello there. Thank you for the invite.
No worries. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Nice and relaxed now. Home from work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember those days.
Yeah.
I work from home now, so it's just a case of I can't get home from work because it's just across the other side of the front room. Oh dear, it's terrible. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the paranormal right from the beginning?
Well, it was like most people, it kind of just happened. It kind of just sort of came into itself. It was a case of like when I was younger, I had questions. There was materials left lying around by parents that sort of like got me interested in things like the unexplained and cryptozoology and things like that. And when I was very young, I sort of like, my memory of it is that I had a visit from my nan, which wasn't possible because she was ill in the hospital and she passed away.
Okay.
To me, it was as real as any other memory. It wasn't as a dream. It actually happened. And obviously, when I reported back to my parents and told them what had happened, they said, well, that's impossible. She passed away.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what got me into it. And it sort of started from there at a very young age of about 8. As say, curiosity peaked. Sort of like as I got older, then it kind of became a teenager and all that got dropped, and I came out of being a teenager and sort of like got a little bit older, and I picked up again with sort of like paranormal interests, and it kind of grew from there, and it's grown into what it is today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite jealous because the amount of people that we interview and I put that question to them, they always say that when they was a kid, they were visited by a spirit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't see or hear or anything like that spirit-wise, and for me, it was just a case of reading the books, and that's what got me interest. I've never experienced any of that.
Right.
And I was so love to. Quite jealous now. It always happens to everyone else.
Yeah, well, again, be careful what you wish for.
Well, that's it. I've always said, full-bodied apparition, like in the Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah.
The first one in the library. That's what I want to see. Yeah. And then that's the day I'm like, yeah, I can't believe.
Yeah, I think
He'll push
to be
me
honest,
to the front there. You know this. If that ever happened, it wouldn't be him at the front. It would be me at the front getting slimed.
Absolutely.
He'll be the one videoing it. Go, that's fine, Kerry. Get closer, get closer.
Yeah. That's it. Get up.
Oh dear, sorry, I
Yeah, we'll
interrupted
be
there.
doing the weekend on our investigation.
Oh
It's okay,
God,
no problem.
honestly, it's going to be fun.
It is. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what happened on one of our events a couple of years ago. Somebody got scratched, and it was one of the investigators, and we tried to debunk it the best that we could, because that's what we try and do. And we couldn't, and she was a little bit taken aback, and we were like, so, right, you're going back in, where's the video recording? And she's like, no, I'm not going back in.
Well, that's it. That always baffles me, because people say that, you know, obviously they're investigators and they want to, you know, come that close to spirit. Mm-hmm. But when it actually happens, they run away.
Yeah.
Not many people are the ones that go, right, okay, well, let's go and explain that. Let's go back into that room. Let's try and find an explanation. There's not many people that would do that.
Oh, she did. She went back in twice, you know, so hat off to her.
Yeah.
And she's not normally the type to run away, but as I said, this was like a physical thing that kind of happened, and
you got your flight or fight response.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And as I say, we looked for everything that we possibly could to try and debunk it, and there was nothing there that could help us do that.
Mm. What location was that? Are you able to disclose that?
I'm not, I'm afraid, no.
Okay. Private investigation then, yeah?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, cool. We done an investigation down in the True Crimes Museum in is it Hastings? Yes, I think it is Hastings.
Yeah.
And a few of our investigators got scratched. Now, because it was cold and they all had their coats done up, and you know, I just put it down to maybe they've scratched themselves. But there was one investigator. She had this sharp pain underneath her coat, and when she took her coat off, she had like a red mark on the top of her chest, and then it started blistering up in 3 bubbles of like blisters in the shape of a triangle.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, where she got that was next to the bed where they used to give the lethal injection. And I think isn't there 3 jabs they give you for that?
I think there is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's that's the only logical explanation that I can come up with that it could have been. You know, there was nothing else there that could have caused that. She didn't do it herself. So yeah, it was just quite an interesting experience, that. But yeah, once that happened, I was like, "Come on in, let's do it again. I'm here. Come and do it to me." Nothing.
Never. No.
It's always the way.
Yeah. Quite true.
Yeah. So, what prompted you to set up your own paranormal team?
It was kind of I was running a group on Facebook, which was the Paranormal Supernatural Network, and sort of like we had people who come on board and sort of like left comments and asked for help and this, that, and the other. And then one day I was contacted by a guy who wanted to know if he could sort of like mention a company he was with, and you know, was sort of like a thanks for that. He invited me along to be there as a guest that night. I paid, of course, just to be sort of like on the safe side, as you do.
Yeah.
And I was invited back for quite a few more. And it's not to say that they did anything wrong. I've got to stress that.
Yeah.
It was more to say that I saw things differently. And I'd become friends with a couple of people who'd been attending their events. And we decided to just sort of like go out by ourselves and go to local places of interest and look around our area. Now, our area of Liverpool and Merseyside has quite a lot of locations that have been pointed out by the likes of a local author who's done quite a few sort of mini books, I suppose you'd call them.
Yeah.
Kind of they're like thick pamphlet books, and this kind of went from a little group into sort of like getting together more, and then it kind of came into, well, we want to do other places, and then we looked into it, and people wanted to start charging and this, that, and the other, and wanted insurances, and we said, well, let's do it for our own purpose and see where we go. So we did, and that kind of, again, sort of like was born into something else, and again into something else, and we're here sort of like 4 years down the line.
Excellent.
And there's three of us who are the founders and owners, which is myself and my two business partners. I don't know whether they want to be named, so I'm not going to name them.
Okay. Partner A and partner B.
They're not around for me to get permission off. So, yeah, and it's just become what it is. And then sort of like what we do now. Last year we done just shy of 50 events, and this year we've done less, because we decided that we were going to take a little bit of a back step this year and do more private stuff and more stuff for us to try and research and investigate rather than sort of like events. So we kind of slowed down a lot this year.
Yeah, that must have been. Yeah, I've had a lazy year this year myself. It's been that sort of year, really, hasn't it? I think a lot of people have done the same.
Yeah, well, I think last year was, I think, something that we wanted to do. We wanted to get a bit of a footing, and as I say, we done 49 events, just shy of that 50. When you look at 52 weeks in a year, it's sort of like it was full on, and it was every week. And obviously that takes other things away from family commitments and things like that. We just thought, right, we're not going to do that next year. We're going to slow it down and just try a happy medium, which we've kind of done this year. And again, next year we've slowed it down a little bit more as well.
Yeah. Have you attended any conventions this year?
Conventions wise, we've not done any sort of like paranormal conventions kind of thing. We've just sort of like gone round to some of the other conventions where we've sort of like handed out cards and sort of like spoke to people, etc. We done one of the horror cons, and that was quite good because people had a similar interest because they were interested in horror.
Yeah,
we did try it at one of the Comic Cons, but it was absolutely pointless. People were more interested in Superman than anything else, or Batman. They weren't interested in any sort of like ghosts unless you were Scooby-Doo and Shaggy and Thelma and all that.
Well, that's it, and the Ghostbusters as well.
Oh yeah. Actually, we did get a few photos taken with some people dressed up as Ghostbusters. So it was good. A bit of publicity.
That's it. The real ones and the fake ones.
That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm not saying which is which.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely don't do that. No, don't name and shame on this show.
No, I meant the Ghostbusters. I don't believe that Dan Aykroyd for a minute.
All right, do you know what? I've always said that I would love to interview Dan Aykroyd because he wrote the new Ghostbusters film.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell was you thinking? That's my question.
You hated it. I loved it.
Oh, I hated it.
No, I hated it.
I think the story would have been fitted better if they was to tweak it so that it was a sequel.
Yeah.
And not a reboot. It would have worked so much better, but it was just too Scooby-Doo comic bookish, and I hated it.
Yeah,
I
I've
loved
attempted
it.
to watch it.
Yeah, it just...
No, I think it would have been
captured...
better if they kind of put it as they'd retired and there was sort of like a spike and, sort of like maybe their children took up the mantle kind of thing. Maybe something like that would work better, but hey-ho, each to their own.
It was just the fact it was too silly for me. I mean, I obviously know it's not going to be real anyway, but the first film, although it was a comedy, it was almost quite reality driven.
Sorry.
No, it was. It was all scientific, and they were actually trying to catch ghosts, and that's what they did. But in the new one, it was more like, well, we just want to beat the ghosts up. We don't want to catch them anymore. Because let's face it, they caught one ghost and let him go. So, it was ridiculous. And then they go around punching ghosts, knocking them unconscious, which is just stupid.
Yeah, but that's girl power for you.
Yeah.
Well, not knocking girl power, but that was just ridiculous. That was mocking it, I think.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
And I think it was based more around comedy, but if you look at some of the fundamentals in the first one, some of those ideas now, the paranormal equipment's based on, it's very much sort of like Star Trek.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the stuff that was in the episodes years ago is now kind of out on the common market, and we use, for argument's sake, the mobile phone, etc. You know, that was the first communicator, and you've got to look at that. You know, in the movies of sort of like Ghostbusters and stuff, you know, these things that they're using are very similar to what we use now with, you know, monitoring sort of like microwaves and KT meters and such. You know, so. There are those things in the film which are quite serious as well and quite.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the original one, you just had that little black box with the two arms that have come out, and that was their K2 meter basically.
Yeah.
And in the new one, they had this handheld box with a lot of glow sticks poking out of it, swizzling around. You could have someone's eye out. Let's face it.
Yeah.
So not happening. So never going to be in the paranormal field. That.
Just some of them.
Well, yeah, just not that one. And I'm not too keen on the glove that punches the spirits and knocks them unconscious, so they're flat out on the floor.
No, that was all kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that was just silly.
Yeah.
just brings me back to is it Monty Python, wasn't it? When they're done sketches. Stop it! That's silly. Go away.
Yeah.
I feel that somewhat. I feel that sometimes when I watch certain TV programs.
Yes, Ghostbusters being one of them. Anyway,
that kind of brings me to sort of like that terminology of ghost hunters. I always sort of like when somebody says ghost hunting, I always sort of like have this image of this poor frightened ghost sort of like running around while this investigator's got a net trying to catch it. You know, it's not exactly what we want to put out there. You know, it's paranormal investigating. It's not ghost hunting. You know, it's a case of like, don't hunt me. You know, help me.
Absolutely, and I do think there is a big difference between ghost hunters and paranormal investigators.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it does bug me when people go, "Are you a ghost hunter?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, no." Sort of, I can understand where they're coming from because I've run a company that does the ghost hunting, but I still prefer myself to be an investigator because I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I want to know all the ins and outs of why it's happening and, you know, all the scientific stuff. So when we do private investigations, that's sort of the way we take it. We don't do ghost hunting stuff. And when I've got staff now that does all the ghost hunting stuff for me, so I don't have to. and I'll stick into that, I think.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Oh dear, I don't know. So where's the best place that you've investigated? Have you got a favourite?
I suppose so. It's Margam Castle, which is sort of like South Wales, kind of.
Yep, I've been there.
Yeah, it's it plays the part, so to speak, visually, in the sense of like as you're driving, sort of like towards the building itself, it kind of resembles sort of like what Greystoke looks like in Tarzan.
Yeah,
and it that's part and parcel of an event for me. Whereas when you're approaching sort of like an event and a venue, it looks the part. It gives you that feeling of positivity and kind of draws you in. That had that, and then sort of like we had to drive around the park and sort of like in through the back, and then we got out and we went into this castle. And the castle itself is absolutely phenomenal. It's been messed around with a little bit, sort of like over the years, because it's used by TV shows and media shows.
Yeah.
And they obviously do a lot of filming there and so on and so forth. But yeah, it was just one of those places that kind of really made me go away thinking, well, this is kind of sort of like put back in my mind today that, you know, there are things out there that we just cannot explain, we just cannot debunk. And they've all been kind of present tonight. And I've had that a couple of times when I've been there, and it, you know, it's just a place that I do like, and I've had some experiences there.
So I've never investigated there, but I have visited it. I was on a family holiday to a place just outside Cardiff, like a caravan park thing down there, and we went there as a day trip just to have a scout around to see where it was and how big it was and stuff. And it is a beautiful building, very gothic. It was massive. The architecture is absolutely fantastic there as well.
Sorry, go on.
I would just love to just live there. That would have been awesome.
Oh yeah, and you know, the inside of it, a lot of it's been kept true. As I say, they've messed with some of it, but you know, it's very sort of like it's just there aesthetically in your mind. It's kind of like it's appealing. It's ticking the boxes, and it kind of puts you in that positive frame of mind, as I say, to investigate.
Yeah,
you know, you're kind of like you're buzzing, and I think because of that, you know, you get more out of it, I suppose. But as I say,
well, that's it. I think it's one of those places that you would expect to be haunted.
Yeah.
It is a very typical ghost house, really, isn't it? I suppose.
It is, yeah. As you say, it's that image as you drive up. You know, it's kind of like that haunted castle you see in Scooby-Doo, etc. It's there. It's, you know, it's kind of like it. As I say, it ticks all the boxes. But yeah, fantastic location. I've enjoyed many locations over the years, but that has been a favourite.
Yeah, cool. Kerry, is there any questions or anything in the chat room, or what's the chat room going on about tonight?
We've got James and Stephanie in the chat room at the moment, going on the Ghostbusters thing. James has said all the Ghostbusters do is open people's minds to more understanding of the universe that we don't understand. So basically, it's introducing people into the world of the paranormal. And Stephanie says, don't pick on Ghostbusters. You laughed at it along with me.
Yeah,
hate it.
No. I laughed at it.
And that you even have the Ghostbusters as your theme tune, as your alarm.
I do have my. I've got both Ghostbusters theme tune. I've got the theme they do for the new film as my ringtone, and then to get me up in the morning, it's the original theme tune. Very apt. Yeah. So is that all they're talking about
at this moment in time? Yep. They haven't caught up with us on Margam yet. Margam.
Yeah.
Margam cast.
I'm just actually looking at pictures of it on the internet whilst we're talking, because I was talking to Kaz Rooney the other week, and she was talking about this place, and she's hoping to book it next year for an investigation. And it's beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
It is.
The day I was there, the TARDIS was there as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That
set it off for me. Yeah.
I say it's just one of those buildings that kind of ticks all those boxes that you want to draw people in.
Yeah.
Brilliant place.
Yeah. I would love to go there. That is on my list.
Yeah.
So if Kaz does it for Trident next year,
that's what she's looking at doing, I believe. I'm going to share the link into this, because if you don't know this particular location, I'm going to share the link into the chat room. It is gorgeous, guys. I want to go there next year.
Yes, we will go there at some point.
Come on, boss, sort it out.
Kaz is on the case. It's fine. Yeah, can't expect him to do everything, but yeah. Yeah, so... But anyway, going back to what we were talking about, what was he talking about? Margam Castle being...
One of your
One of
favourite
the-
locations.
What
right.
about... have you been to a location that's you just thought, this is rubbish?
Not necessarily rubbish. Sometimes it's a case of like they've not lived up to expectations, but
Yeah.
again, we all know that you can go one day to another and it will be completely different. So you could go one day and it's really, really quiet, and then the next day, lots of different opportunities will present themselves to make it a better or worse night.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to get with every kind of venue that you visit. I don't think there's any kind of venues that have put me off, sort of like going back to them.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had any kind of real terrible places. I suppose sometimes maybe some of the people who run them have kind of put me off rebooking them.
Yeah.
And that's because they have too many rules and regulations. I suppose sort of like, one place we went to, we weren't allowed to sort of like use our own refreshments. And they kind of insisted that we use theirs, and that wasn't fair to the people who purchased the tickets. We felt,
Yeah.
and all sorts of catering costs and security costs, had to be looked at because they were being forced onto the venue price on top of.
Yeah.
And it kind of it put the tickets into an unrealistic kind of like price range, but yeah, there was still enough interest there for us to do it, so we did. But it's one we wouldn't repeat. We have done some unusual locations, probably locations that some other people kind of wouldn't look at.
Yeah.
We done a race course, and everybody was like, "Well, you're not really going to be able to see much there. In the stables, dead horses, all that kind of thing." But again, this is where people sort of like don't really look at things. There is a kind of a whole setup from the early Victorians and pre-Victorian sort of like buildings and village set up around it. That's kind of what some people lose sight of. It's not just what's there at the time that's being investigated; it's what's been there before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, as I say, we kind of look at venues and look at them in that light, and we try and sort of like say, well, nothing's been really terrible or bad. It's probably just the management of it rather than the site itself.
Yeah. Do you do when you pick a location to sell as for the customers? Do you do any research on it beforehand?
Well, yes, we do. We have a research officer, if I can call them that, I suppose. And what she does is she does all that for us, and we don't look at that material.
Yeah.
But it's there for us to sort of like go to if somebody comes up with some sort of like information, and we confirm or deny it.
Yeah.
The reason we do that is because we don't like to sort of like plant seeds or suggestion through investigations.
Yeah.
So kind of we like to try and keep it a bit more true. So that way, sort of like we're not kind of saying, well, in early Victorian times of 1902, sort of like so on and so forth, because then people will start getting that era, etc. Or some things, even subliminally, kind of, it could be there. By seeing some of those details. So we do research them, but we kind of keep them private. We do guess that other people who are going probably research it before they go. But again, it's just our responsibility as a team that we try and look at rather than theirs.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And we try and do the same sort of thing. There's normally one person that does all the history, like you said. And, we go around and confirm and deny anything that gets picked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What about, obviously, what was on the land beforehand? Do you do any of that research as well, or?
Well, again, what the person who does the research is, what she does is she looks at what's there currently. She looks at if there's any kind of history tied into it beforehand or kind of associated with it, maybe.
Yeah.
because what we've found with some places is that something might be associated with it, but they kind of may have moved down the road, so something may kind of drag it back and pay it back in, so to speak. So we do. There's places there where we went to. We had the opportunity to investigate a social club.
Yeah.
And this social club was quite a large church beforehand.
Okay.
And that church had been there sort of like dating back to late 1700s, but that had replaced the timber frame church that had been there.
Okay.
That had dated back to 1500s. And again, the site before that church was part of a Saxon settlement. So, yeah, it's kind of, we take it back as far as we can.
Yeah.
We try not to get bogged down with too much. We just try and feed it into where we found information could be something to do with what we've found.
Yeah. What's your opinion on investigating churches and graveyards?
Again, I think it's a broader sort of like perspective than sort of like probably some.
Yeah.
I think you should always respect something.
Yeah.
And even if you're not kind of religious or you don't follow that kind of following that those people do, then you've still got to respect it because it's important. Yeah. A lot of people nowadays, they don't believe in sort of like religion, or they only believe in certain types of religion, or they're against religion.
Yeah.
I suppose, to them, something that's important to you, like doing an investigation in a graveyard, that wouldn't bother them too much because they didn't believe in sort of like, religion. But at the end of the day, you still got to respect the fact that people are buried there.
Well, that's it. I mean, my take on it is basically these people were laid to rest, so let them rest. If they want to communicate, then they're not going to be hanging around the local graveyard. They're going to go to the places where they loved, and are going to want to haunt, as opposed to sitting around their grave all day. I can't imagine I'm doing that anyway.
Well, I have come across it. We've had these conversations in groups on something like social media sites, and we've been asked our opinions and our advice. And what we've said is, look, if you're going to do an investigation somewhere and you're using such devices as sort of like, spirit writers and so on and so forth, and even boards, etc., then that's okay on an investigation, so to speak, but it's not something you take into a place of rest, or a church, etc. But there would be no harm there in using modern day equipment, and maybe something like calling out for people to come back to you. But again, you wouldn't cross that line, being disrespectful, or kind of opening up a facility to communicate back with them. You'd only sort of like let them at their will.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'm quite respect. Go on.
Sorry, I think you're actually missing a huge point though, in regard to churches and graveyards. Is they're a huge part of the community and have been for generations, and a lot of big events take place at churches. They're a hub of the community, or were more back in the day, a hub of the community. And people used to go there for all sorts of reasons, whether that be, you've only got to think back into the Middle Ages, where people used to claim sanctuary within the church if they were in trouble. That don't, just because people are laid to rest there once they've passed, doesn't take out the history and the community that a church has. So I still think that they're worth investigating, with permission, obviously, and with respect, obviously. But I still think they're definitely worth investigating. And we've had some great investigations at places like that, not so much amongst the gravestones, but around the actual church itself. Now, we have had a question in the chat room. Do you think local heritage and dialect plays part in more affinity with certain places?
I suppose it could do, because we've been to various places, and you know, we've had sort of like foreign languages coming back. We've had dialects that have kind of, you know, sort of like been spelt different because they're from different times, periods, etc. And I think it's relevant again to what's happened at that time when that's kind of absorbed, you know, echo-wise into that area. So, yeah, it could be. And as I say, you know, we've done locations there with sort of, and it's kind of been strange where we've had 2 or 3 different languages from what could have been 2 or 3 different spirits responding. Yeah. And again, it could be associated to sort of like that, you know, history. Like we investigated some tunnels in Liverpool, and those tunnels were renowned for giving people work when they came back from the war, and they were sort of like, you know, there was foreigners who were given work there as well, and we, you know, as I say, we had foreign languages feeding back, so it could tie in. It could be important. Yeah.
So I mean, I've experienced that sort of thing using the Ouija board. You know, when you're asking for spirit to communicate, sometimes it comes back garbled, but occasionally it's come back as talking a foreign language, or they can't read or write themselves, so you can't get the message. So, you know, that's sort of something else to look at. I mean, if you're investigating a place that used to have an old monastery on site, you know, these monks or whatever could have spoken Latin.
We've had that a few times in various locations where, going back to what I was saying before, is, you know, some of those dialects, some of those languages have come back to us, which are kind of spelled a little bit wrong to us in a modern day sense, but back then made more sense. And you know, what we try and do is we try and keep our sort of like phones, etc., on the aeroplane mode to, you know, prevent any distraction, but also to stop any interference with any of the equipment. But what we will do is, if we've got something like that which has presented itself, we'll go online and we'll look at, you know, sort of like something that will help tie us in. And occasionally, you know, we've had Latin words that are tied in. And we've had sort of like other things, because we use boards which have got symbols on as well, and some of those symbols have been relevant to conversations that have happened and have been fed back to us as well. Yeah. So yeah, you know, it is important to look at other things, not just look at it black and white, but to look at the spectrum.
Very much so, and that would also apply to asking the questions as well.
Yeah.
You know, because if we go abroad to, say, France, for example, and, you know, you're doing an investigation in France, you're going to want to ask your questions in French, because the spirit won't understand. But then you've also got the age dialect as well, haven't you, I suppose?
Yeah.
So it could open up all sorts of can of worms, really, couldn't it?
It does, and you know, as I say, we you know, we're sort of like, we've had responses there which tie into words from Latin, from Hebrew, etc., and so on. And again, it does make it all the more difficult to try and research and to try and keep on top of something when something's, you know, going sort of like full pelt.
Yeah.
But again, we've had sort of like responses and communications there, as I say, from different languages, and when you're trying to communicate back, it's quite difficult, like you say. When you communicate in a different language, and yet, you know, your spirit board doesn't sort of like cut it because it's not in the right text.
Absolutely.
So you're based down in the Liverpool Merseyside area, is that right, John?
Yes.
That was a huge slave import area, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. You know, Liverpool obviously, you know, they weren't directly responsible, you know, where they were just sort of like more of a place to give those people who were, you know, unfortunate of landing in this area somewhere to stay. So yeah.
Have you had any investigations that have linked into that?
Again, yes. You know, going back to the sort of like conversation we just had, you know, we've investigated many places in Liverpool, sort of like the town halls, the big St George's Hall. We've done the old medical institutes and so on and so forth. And they've all been buildings where people from different sort of like religions, different communities from abroad and so on have been established in those sites. And again, you know, some of the things that have been fed back to us through, you know, different things that we've used kind of tie in. Like, we use a lot of computer-based programs as well, and some of the information that will come back from those programs, like Alice boxes and SCD1 programs and stuff like that, you know, where they use word banks, etc. They'll tie into some of the things that are relevant. Now, I understand that we have to input them into those programs, but those programs pick them at random along with other words that are in there that are associated to something else. So, yeah, somebody could say around and say, yeah, well, it's a little bit of coincidence, but you know, we do seem to get responses that something definitely did happen, something definitely, you know, wants to sort of like talk about it, communicate about it, feedback about it, and you know, it's definitely there, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Just through various experiments, you know, even sort of like we did a scrying experiment. And sort of like, again, some people believe in scrying, some people don't, etc. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions.
Yeah.
But within that scrying, you know, the image that we saw was sort of like fed back to us by the people who paid to be on the event, that it was an African Caribbean kind of image. And the Alice box was feeding us back words which were similar, sort of like background, etc. and so on. And it was all in an area that, you know, had sort of like an infamy around sort of like the slave trade, etc. and so on. And it was just, again, it was quite powerful. It was sort of like three things all tying in at once and making sense.
Yeah.
And it was a good night.
Was that an investigation? It was just your team, or was it?
Well, it's been on both, to be honest with you, because I say we've investigated a lot of different places over sort of like the years that we've been going. So some of them have been public and some of them have been private, but that particular one was a public one.
I was just thinking that maybe because obviously you're in that environment and you know the history, or you know that it's attributed to slave trade, you would have had that in your mind, in your mindset. So that could have been something that he was expecting.
It could be, but as I say, what we try and do is we try to look at processes of elimination. We try to debunk things, etc.
Yeah.
And as I say, you know, even though we put those words in word banks, etc., and you can look at sort of like, you know, coincidences, etc. When you've got sort of like, okay, you've got people sort of like who are in that area and you're doing the scrying, yes, they could say that was kind of like what was in their mind. You could look at subliminal sort of like conception, etc. But for those words to tie in from other things, you know, from sort of like boards, from writers, from word banks, from radio sort of like programs which are scanning frequencies, etc.
Yeah.
When they all start coming together and they all start pointing in the same direction, you think to yourself, well, there's something at play here. It's not just seed or suggestion.
Yeah, you're not just looking at one aspect, are you? You're not just taking like scrying as standalone. You're actually backing that up with other things, and it is strange when they all start to like synchronize almost with the same kind of thing.
Yeah. And we do get that on quite a few occasions, and as I say, they're the ones where it kind of makes you sit back and think, there's definitely something here. We don't know what it is, but there's definitely something, you know, because it all just starts to make sense when it shouldn't.
No, I can understand that. Do you have like an Ovilus or?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few of the SP sort of like 7s, 11s, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we use a lot of programs. We look at sort of like the American-based stuff as well, because they seem to be a little bit ahead. So we use quite a few programs which are computer-based, and they scan radio frequencies, etc. We look at sort of like programs like the SCD1, SCD2, ethereal voice box, all that kind of stuff, and they're based around the original Frank's box, etc.
Yeah.
It's kind of bought into this day and age's technology.
Yeah. I mean, someone on my team, they downloaded the Simon Says app on the phone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, it's designed as a game, but he put that out on the table and asked Spirit to come out and touch one of the colours. And sure enough, some of the colours did go off.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not in the program to just go off unless someone touches it.
No.
So that sort of made me think, well, if a Spirit could do that, why can't it text?
Yeah.
It's like updated version of the Ouija board, really. It'd be interesting. Yeah. It'd be interesting to look into.
Yeah, I think it's whatever channel sort of like they pick at the time that they can kind of be able to feed back into, because we've asked this question many a times over different, various types of equipment. Like one of them was the Echo Box. It's kind of died down now, but people still use it.
Yeah.
We're like, well, how can it scan radio frequencies and give you words when I put my phone on airplane mode? You were like, yeah, it's a good question, that. Yeah, and it's just those little things that come back from people who always constantly challenge, sort of like new ways. But what we kind of try and do is the programs that we use, we can add to those dictionaries, we can add word banks to those banks that are already in existence.
Okay.
So what we could do is we could put some of the information in about the venue or some of the history. Now, whether that comes up in that night is just potluck, I suppose, to us, to sort of like people in general. But when you have a conversation where several pieces of those word banks that you put in come out over a period of that experiment, you start to to yourself, hang on, this is more manipulation than coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had an issue with the whole word bank devices, because it's almost like that all the words in it are associated to the paranormal in one way or another. So no matter where you are, it's still going to come out with the word ghost or demon, or do you know what I mean? And
some of the ones that we work with, you can take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we kind of try and do. We try and build a bank of words that are kind of more able to sort of like be able to communicate back in a way you'd be able to accept the conversation rather than just come up with random words. So therefore, what you could do is you could take out those words and you could put in sentences, or you could delete all those words out of that and just put in the ones that you think might be relevant for that evening. But obviously, you don't want to just put the history and everything associated in with it, because that's all it feedback anyway.
Yeah.
So it's very much about the responsibility of the person who's going to use it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to try and put words, maybe even sounds as opposed to words.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it can make up its own words, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. We all want sort of like that android that's going to be able to feedback and learn and build, rather than sort of like just a program.
Yeah. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, we need a sharer. I think it's called a sharer, the android, isn't it? That sort of like learns how to mimic facial gestures and tell jokes. We need one of them.
Yeah, I can imagine it. You go to paranormal investigation and you get jokes come through.
Yeah.
That was quite entertaining. Yeah.
We did look at the price of it, but a couple of £1 million was out of our budget.
Oh, I'll have 4 of those, I think. Yeah, got to be done. It is quite pricey, some of the equipment and stuff. So do you buy your own equipment, or do you use the money raised from the events you do to buy it? Or
well, in the beginning, when we first started off, we purchased everything ourselves, and it was quite costly, to us out of our pocket. And that's a lot of that equipment's still around, and what we do now is we still do that, and we still buy in stuff that sort of like people want, because we have a membership based thing as well.
Yeah.
Where sort of like people feedback to us what they want to do and what they want to see and so on and so forth. So we buy in stuff that they want as well. And some of it comes from abroad, so there's massive shipping taxes, and sort of like the shipping taxes can be just as much as the cost of the product and so on and so forth. But again, it's people always wanting that new piece of equipment that helps them, more or less kind of thing that, there is something out there, and and that's what people want more and more. They want another way of proving it, another way of finding out. They want another way of getting that evidence.
Yeah.
Do you ever quite expensive?
Do you ever make your own equipment?
Not necessarily. We pay people to make equipment for us. Sort of like, I'm not very technical minded.
Yeah.
And a couple of the others are kind of a little bit technical minded, but again, I think to us, it's kind of easier to get somebody to make it.
Yeah.
Because they know what they're doing rather than us.
Yeah, that makes
we
sense.
can spend a lot of time doing it, it might not work, and they can do it, and we know it'll be guaranteed to work. And plus, we work full time as well as doing this, and you haven't always got that time to sit down and accomplish everything you want. So sometimes it's easier to get somebody else to do it and just give them the readies for it.
Absolutely. I've always wanted to experiment with a Tesla machine.
Yeah.
That'd be quite good. Tesla with a Faraday cage. And I actually know a group that was quite local to me. They were the only ones I've ever seen use a Tesla.
Yeah.
And they used it that particular night. Nothing really happened, but I don't think they really used it
effectively.
No, no. They just used it for an effect, really, I think.
Yeah.
Just because no one else has ever done it. But I think, that could be quite interesting, that.
I know people who've gone through extremes like that, who've kind of made those machines, and it kind of you sort of like I suppose you get other people saying Faraday cages, etc., and so on, and they say, well, isn't that designed to keep it in rather than keep it out? So if you keep it out and you communicate with them, they start asking questions that get everybody confused.
Well, that's it. I think didn't one of the TV shows test out a Tesla? They tried electrocuting one of their members of staff inside the Faraday cage.
Yeah,
it's like, what are you trying to prove? That the Faraday cage works? Well done. It's still alive.
And I've known people as well to go out and buy these balls with the I forgot what they're called now.
The plasma balls.
The plasma balls. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
And to get sort of like the Telsa effect, what they do is they smash the globe.
Oh.
So you turn it on, there's no globe, but obviously it still does.
What Wally?
Yeah, and people do it, but again, as you say, it's for effect.
Well, I mean, I've got one of those plasma balls, and I use it occasionally on events for two reasons, really. Mm-hmm. One, it works exactly the same as an EM pump.
Yeah.
And two, it looks pretty.
Yeah.
That's it.
God.
That's the only two reasons I use it. Well, I mean, it's just more effective than an EM pump. Yeah. An EM pump is a little black box, will just sit there with the aerial and the red light on. Or just...
Yeah.
And that's it.
Again, equipment, it can be affected in various ways. With the plasma balls, we've had them out in one location, and the point on them has been very static, as if somebody's been touching it.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just on one ball; it was on two, and they were sort of like 3 foot apart.
Yeah,
we moved them around the room, and obviously they changed. But each time they went back to this point, they were as if somebody was touching them, and nobody was near them, and again. That was sort of like it was that anomaly that nobody could explain. And we tested around it for anything that could be affecting it. We checked with K2s, we checked with, periscopes. We checked with everything, and there was nothing that could indicate as to why that was happening. But in that area, it was just one point where it was sort of like going to in the ball instead of like 2 or 3 places. And that should only happen if something is earthed to it. And we were like, well, nothing's earthing it, so why is it doing it? Very strange.
Well, that's it. I think there is something in them, using those in particular, because as you're obviously using or boosting the energy of the spirit or the spirit world. So I do think there's something in them. Yeah. And I would rather use that than the end pump. Yeah. And
we have found equipment, that kind of do sort of like come into play, where they wouldn't normally if somebody was standing within a proximity, because then there's an earth which it'll ground to through the air. So we kind of know how that works, but on this particular night that wasn't the case. Just wanted to clarify that in case anybody said it in the chat room.
Yeah. I just love, discussing the paranormal with, anybody, and I'll always come up with new ideas, and I like to put in those ideas into practice, even if they don't work. I mean, there was that thing on Facebook or YouTube or something, that Charlie experiment. Yeah. Did you ever try that?
We didn't try it on the investigation, though. We did try it on one of the group nights, and kind of something happened, and then nothing happened, and then something happened, and again we were like, well, I think we were probably one of the last groups to look at it, and the reason we were kind of like one of the last groups to look at it, we were like, well, this has kind of just come out. If it was a known source to be worth, to have results, then it would have been around before and somebody would have knew about it.
Yeah.
So we kind of had an idea that it had come off the back of something like some of these Japanese games create all these Marys and so on and so forth. And,
I think it was sort of like an urban legend, like the old Bloody Mary in the mirror and things like that.
Yeah. And the thing is, in some countries, there are a lot of paranormal games like the Mary, like the Charlie, and so on.
Yeah.
And people go out there and look at them, and then they forget they are kind of just games, and they try and bring them into the paranormal.
Exactly.
Use them as experiments, and it just doesn't work.
No, that's it. But these things will be tried.
Yeah, and you can't ignore them either, because somewhere something might just work.
Yeah, you never know. Well, sadly, we have come to the end of the show. Kerry, before we go, is there anything in the chat room that you need to read out?
Not particularly, but thank you to James, Stephanie, Snarky of Oz. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat room. As always, it's been great reading your comments.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us, as Kerry said. Thank you, John, for joining us also. And what's happening during the week, Kerry?
Well, tomorrow on Haunted Histories, we've got Penny G. Morgan talking about, funny enough, the True Crimes Museum that you were talking about earlier in the show. She's talking with Chris Howley from Ghost Chasers fame.
Okay.
So that should be an interesting one. On Thursday is the KTPF Reload show. I don't quite know what the topic is on that one. And then on the Dark Mirror show on Friday evening, we're talking all about Harry Price and his influence on the paranormal. And then on Sunday, I've got a special interview going on with Graham Phillips.
Ooh. And I'm going to the cinema Sunday.
What are you going to go and see, Paul?
The Justice League.
I'm going Monday.
I've already seen it, but my godson wants to see it, so I'm going to take him Sunday.
Yeah, I'm taking my boys to see that on Monday evening, so we can compare notes on Tuesday.
We could. Yeah. And on, mind you, next Tuesday we could also talk about our investigation we're doing.
Yeah,
Saturday.
we could. Yeah, we could. I'll see if I can nag one of the others or a couple of the others to come on and talk about it as well, if you like.
That would be awesome. We'll see.
Okay, we'll have a chat. We'll see what we can arrange on Saturday night, because that's going to be a really interesting investigation that we're doing. And we're approaching it in a completely different way. So, yeah, it'd be good to discuss.
Yes, indeed. But thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, John, for stepping in at the last minute. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and we will definitely have you on the show again, talking about that other subject that we're not going to talk about now.
Okay. Thank you both very much for the opportunity.
No problem, and I shall see you again very soon, John. And everyone else, thank you, and we will see you all again next week.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.